Well, once again, good morning, church. Let me begin today with a clarification and a confession. I scheduled tonight's night of worship long before I had any idea what the NFL playoff schedule was going to be or who would be playing. One of the main reasons for having it tonight was to close our season of prayer and fasting with a dedicated time of worship. And when I discovered that the Chiefs game was set for the same time as our night of worship, I was really frustrated. I know that some of you, maybe a lot of you, really want to watch the Chiefs, and I understand why you want to watch. I want to watch them, and I'm not even a Chiefs fan. So you'll not get any judgment from me if you stay home to watch the playoffs tonight. But I am hoping that a lot of you who are fans also have a DVR or some way to stream the game and watch it later after you've enjoyed a special time of drawing close to the Lord with us. I'll leave that between you and God. Let's look again at our illustration of a compass. It reminds us of what we need to stay on course as a church and as individuals who are following Jesus. Every church and every Christian has the same fourfold purpose for our lives. It can be represented by the 4 points of the compass. E stands for evangelism, N for nurture, W for worship, S for service. And we began this month looking at our need to be involved in evangelism, sharing the good news of the gospel with people who are outside the church so that they can become followers of Jesus with us. And then we tackled the purpose of nurture. This part of our purpose involves our internal ministry to one another, those within the church. It includes teaching and discipleship and helping people heal from the damage of sin and encouraging and counseling those who are struggling, and building strong relational connections and groups to support our shared life and actively caring for one another. This week, we're turning to the mark that points west to focus on being engaged in worship. Now, the world may think of the church only as a provider of social services or as a place for religious meetings, if they even think about us at all. But we who are followers of Jesus Christ must always remember that worship is central to the mission of God as much as anything else that we do. In fact, I would argue that it's not only central, but primary. For everything else that we do is fueled by our worship and aimed at facilitating access to the worship of Jesus Christ by other people. During my 5 years here as pastor, I've preached a lot about worship for exactly that reason. I believe it's both central and primary for Christian faith and for Christian life. And I'm not going to try to repeat or even summarize all of those other messages and series today. If you'd like to learn more about worship, at least from me, I'd encourage you to visit our website and look under the tab for archived sermons, and you'll find several series and individual messages there on the topic. But today we're focusing on this singular point, the importance and the necessity of being personally engaged in worship in order to fulfill the church's mission. Our passage this morning comes from the book of Hebrews. Hebrews is one of the richest books in the New Testament, theologically and spiritually, but it comes at a price. It's also an extraordinarily demanding and complex book that can be daunting the first few times you try to make your way through it. So here's one of the essential keys for understanding the book of Hebrews. And that is this: you have to recognize that there are two primary things happening throughout the entirety of the book. And those two things are like two rails of a railroad track. And they guide the train. They guide the author's message to his readers from the beginning of the book to its end. Both rails are running throughout the book, and the author, who is unknown, though it's someone in the circle of the Apostle Paul's companions, the author switches back and forth between them to get his full message across to his readers. And the first rail is theological, because the book of Hebrews is one long, sustained argument about the superiority of Jesus Christ and the New Covenant compared to Judaism and the Mosaic Covenant. And the author takes out his scholar's pen to thoroughly explain how and why this is so, and to prove his case with an abundance of evidence and careful reasoning. But he repeatedly interrupts his own argument to take out his pastor's voice as the second rail, which is pastoral. The author uses his theological argument as the basis for making a fervent and passionate exhortation to his readers. He insistently urges them to resist the temptation to turn away from following Jesus and instead to pursue him even more faithfully and steadfastly. For he knows that there is no other way to be rightly related to the only God there is, the God of Israel, than to come to him on the way which Jesus made through his death on the cross. And through the entirety of the book, then, these two things are happening. The author is laying out his theological argument and interspersing that argument with an urgent pastoral exhortation and warning. Now, the portion of Hebrews we read this morning happens to be right at one of those intersections of the two rails. Chapter 10 brings the author's theological argument to its conclusion in the verses that we read. And from there he launches into one of the book's most important passages, verses 19 to 25, which is the climax of the positive side of his pastoral exhortation. So in his lengthy theological presentation, the author has argued that Jesus, the Son of God and Messiah, and the new covenant that God initiated through his death and resurrection, those are superior to all of the prophets, including Moses, and to the Mosaic covenant, the Mosaic law that was instituted on Sinai. He points out that the old covenant was unable to cleanse anyone from their sins. The very fact that the sacrifices had to be repeated over and over from year to year demonstrates their weaknesses and their limitations. So instead of providing cleansing from sin, those sacrifices only served as a reminder of sins. And that pointed beyond themselves then to a greater sacrifice that would render the sacrifices of animals obsolete. And that greater sacrifice was the willing sacrifice of the Son of God, which provided once for all time an eternal atonement that cleansed the conscience from sin and sanctified all of those who came to God through faith in Christ. And it was the obedience of the sinless Son of God who did the will of God that made his sacrifice superior to those of the Mosaic law. And it was his superiority as high priest forever on the basis of his resurrection that established this new covenant, a new way to be related to God, as the final definitive covenant of God for his people. Verse 19 then begins a crucial summation of the exhortation that the author has been driving at since the beginning, the opening paragraph of chapter 1. Having drawn his theological argument to a close, he puts down his scholar's pen and he rises to use his pastoral voice. Therefore, he exclaims, that is, because the Son of God, Jesus the Messiah, is superior to all that is in Judaism, all the Mosaic law, therefore, there is something which we must do. He reminds them of what he's urged them already, that we have confidence to come before God. We have confidence to come before God, excuse me, on the basis not of reckoning our obedience to God's commands, but on the basis of the sacrifice of Christ. And that has opened up a new and a living way to come to God. We have a glorious high priest in heaven who stands at the right hand of God, who's not only made this new way possible, he stands ready in the presence of God, always interceding for us. And he does so that we can come into God's presence and live there. He reminds them we've been cleansed by God through our faith, and that we've demonstrated that, testified to that cleansing through the act of water baptism. And on the basis of this truth, that he has urged them then, he says we need to take this singularly most important step of faith. Let us draw near to God. Let us hold fast the confession of our faith, the promise that gives us our hope, that all of this is only available through Christ. And let us come together regularly to draw near to him in order to experience what it is to live in God's presence and to encourage one another to continue in faith until he returns. Let us draw near to God. as the urgent plea not only of the author of Hebrews, but of the Spirit of God who is calling to God's people, to God's church. We have a way to enter the presence of the living God, a way that was not available prior to the death and resurrection of Christ, and which is not available apart from Him. That new and living way is open to us because of Christ. It has been opened to us so that we can come and live in the presence of God all day, every day. But listen, God does not drag us into His presence against our will. Now, someone may have dragged you to the church house, but God doesn't drag anyone into His presence, not against our will. Nor does He grant us entrance into His presence because we showed up at a time and a place that we call church. The old cliche still holds. Going to church doesn't make you a Christian any more than going to a garage makes you a car. The same is true for worship. God has made a way for us to live in His presence, and He invites us to purposefully enter there, to draw near to Him, and to live. We are welcome to come. We are invited to come. We are urged to come. But it takes a step of deliberate faith, purposefully and personally engaging in worship to experience what God has for us. Worship is therefore another way for us to engage in the mission of the church, to live our faith on purpose. What we do when we gather on Sunday mornings and at other times as well is a conscious, habitual reminder that we may enter God's presence at any time. We're exhorted by the Holy Spirit through these verses in Hebrews to do so regularly, together with the gathered people of God as the church. It is a way to practice our faith, both in the sense of repeating something in order to learn or to master it. We practice our worship, but we also practice our faith in the sense of doing something as a matter of conviction. It is our standard practice. Worship is central and foundational to who we are and to what we're to do. It is crucial for our spiritual growth. When we worship together, we are doing something very deliberately and publicly. We are declaring who and what it is that we value more than anything else and to whom we belong. Pastor Jacob just referenced this in our offering time. And we declare this is what we value more than anything else. This is the person we value, and this is the person to whom we belong. Folks, that's the core, rock bottom essence of what worship is. The declaration of who and what has the utmost value, and to whom we belong, to whom we answer, who it is that has our devotion and our love. That's why our weekly worship is so vital to our spiritual health and our mission. Each week when we come together, or whenever we come together, as we will later tonight, we're choosing to live for Jesus on purpose. We're saying that we belong to Jesus Christ, that He has claimed us as His own, that we have no one else and nothing else more valuable than Him. We're saying that His kingdom is more important to us than our comfort, than our security, that His word has our utmost attention, that His people matter more to us than our personal preferences. Worship reorients us to this truth, to the reality of this new and living way. It helps us to stay on point, on track, on course. The church's mission is not to have religious meetings, but to enter into the presence of God through worship so that we don't forget what the whole point of our lives with God is all about. Music is a crucial part of worship. We see that throughout the Bible. There are lots of reasons for that, reasons that are connected to our very nature as created beings. Did you know, for instance, that music therapists are now having success using familiar songs and singing together to help slow down the progress of Alzheimer's disease in some patients? And that music has helped some Alzheimer's patients recover some ability to remember ordinary things unrelated to the music. But here's what we have to remember when it comes to music and worship. Our hymns and choruses and our songs are never entertainment. Never. We don't have a worship team and a choir to entertain anyone, including ourselves. We don't sing because, we happen to like to sing. The music of worship is only a vehicle. It is a way to express our love for God, our devotion to Him, to His kingdom, to His mission. It's a way to draw near to God, to position ourselves before Him so that we can hear from Him, so that we can experience His love personally, and so that we can embrace Him spiritually. It is a vehicle for God to encourage and strengthen our faith, to build us up, so that we're better able to carry out His mission wherever we live, wherever we work. Now, I thought about including a part of my personal testimony in the sermon this morning to share about how coming to understand worship made a dramatic change in my life. I might find a way to share that in another message at some later time. I'm going to save that, though, for tonight, for the night of worship, some of that for tonight. What I do want to do right now, though, is I want to take a look at something. I want to share with you some personal thoughts on engaging in worship. I want to preface this with some important things I want you to know for context's sake. I love our church. I love you. I love First Christian Church. I love what God is doing here. I would not be here if I didn't believe that God had called me to this place, and He made it very clear that He had called me here. I believe that God has a future for our church, and I would not be here if I thought that God was done with us, that we were just going to all grow old and die together. I love our worship team. I love how we're able to blend hymns and traditional liturgy with contemporary music, a little bit of contemporary worship styles, and I'm committed to continuing that model, even though I recognize that we'll also need to adapt and change and grow in order to reach younger people. So, even though I don't want to turn our Sunday morning worship into something like what you'd find at a modern megachurch, I don't believe that our future involves becoming the church that collects all of the disgruntled old people who are leaving their church because their church's music is geared toward younger people. Our opening song this morning was probably new to many of you. How many of you it was brand new to you? Just raise a hand. A lot of you. Okay. I had never heard it before last week. Even though it's nearly 4 years old, it's one of the more popular new worship songs. So when I saw it on our music list for today, I went to the YouTube video to hear the live version played by the folks who wrote it. And I'm going to play a few minutes of this clip of the song, Graves into Gardens, and I'd like you to watch it carefully. And as you watch, think about this question. What do you see and what do you hear? As you watch this clip, what do you see and what do you hear? Stan, go ahead and play it, please.
I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Melts empty praise and treasures of fame are never enough. Then you came along and put me back together. And every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Hey. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Oh. Yes, I know it's true. Come on, tell 'em. Hey, I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain
There's more. We can listen to more. Let me reiterate something. We're not going to change our Sunday morning worship to mimic what you just saw. But we might have a different meeting for worship, say on a Friday night, that looks a lot bit like that. And we might get closer to what you just saw than some of you might be comfortable with or like. That remains to be seen. But back to my question. What did you see and what did you hear? I am very aware of the criticisms of contemporary worship such as we just viewed. It's just a rock concert. It's not worship. It's fluff. Doesn't have any substance. It's weak. It's unbiblical. It's pop psychology with questionable theology. It's terrible music. That's just the tame stuff. I probably haven't heard all the criticisms, but I'm familiar with most of them. And I will agree that there are some contemporary worship songs that I think merit those criticisms. But I will also point out that the same could be said of some hymns. I'll also agree that there are aspects of some of the contemporary worship scene that I find troubling. The similarity to rock concerts is certainly one of those aspects that concerns me. But my concern has more to do with some of what's done around the music than the music itself, the song, the instrumentation, the style, all that. Let me tell you what I saw and heard when I watched this clip for the first time. I saw a song with biblically based lyrics. There are references and allusions in this song to passages in Exodus, Psalms, Isaiah, Ezekiel, the Gospels, 2 Corinthians, and 1 Peter, all of which rightly communicate the sense of the passages that are referenced. I heard a song declaring biblical truth about God. I heard a song giving personal testimony of God's salvation. I heard a song ascribing ultimate value to God, which is the very definition of worship. I heard a song filled with biblical imagery expressed poetically. I heard a singable melody which ordinary people can learn. And heard a catchy tune that gets in your mind so it enhances memory. Here's what else I heard when I thought about the content of the lyrics and the nature of the music. I heard a song with evangelistic value. A message that unbelievers could hear, could relate to, and might even be able to hear God's voice through those words. In a lot of ways, it reminded me of the early Jesus rock music from the 70s. And that also made me think about the kind of songs sung by the Salvation Army and similar church groups in the early 20th century, and some of Charles Wesley's hymns from the Wesleyan revival of the 18th century. I heard a song that had encouragement for people who were struggling with their own failures and weaknesses. I heard a song reminding the church of the victory that we have in Jesus Christ, reminders that help build faith and give us hope. I heard an energetic invitation to joyous praise. And that's just the song itself. When I looked at the people who were singing, what I saw was a host of young people who were fully engaged in worship, who were adamantly and passionately declaring their allegiance to Jesus and affirming that He held the position of utmost value in their lives. I saw people embracing the mission of Christ through worship. Now, I still know people are going to look at that clip and say, okay, fine, but Pastor Barry, that's just not my style. I don't like that kind of music. I get it. But here's what I think is the most important thing we've got to grasp and get right. Are we going to recognize the goodness of God, the touch of the Holy Spirit, and the desirability of what we just viewed, even if it isn't my style? And for the sake of the people whom God is reaching with this music and with this worship style, are we willing to open our hearts to them? Do we understand that what He's doing through people like them and this music is reaching a generation, 96% of whom are unlikely to ever consider setting foot inside a church, much less seriously considering what is said in there? Are we willing to keep our hearts open to them and to their music, to see a new Jesus revolution take place in our time, in our church, like it did a half century ago in the churches that didn't close their doors to the groups of immature, messed up kids who were hungry for Jesus and started expressing that in a way that just was really different. And just for what it's worth, I have seen men and women 10 to 20 years older than me whom I know or have witnessed, including some friends of mine who have now gone on to be home with the Lord, who would be right there with all of those young adults singing that music, thoroughly engaged and praising their hearts out. And they're in their 70s and 80s. I'm not saying that you need to start dancing and jumping around and shouting in order to worship God the right way. Not at all. I don't believe that for a minute. I do believe a little dancing and shouting might do us a little good sometimes. At least a little clapping when the music is upbeat. Maybe dancing on the inside when you can't quite do it on the outside. What I do believe with all my heart is that when people decide to worship on purpose, they choose to enter into the presence of God through music, who will look past the style and past the presentation and the vintage of the music that's used, they'll see God move in their hearts and in their church. And I desperately want to see that be true of us at First Christian Church. So I will leave this with you. How can you actively engage in worship more purposefully today, this next Sunday, this year? What will you do to evangelize this people in our community, to help our church fulfill our purpose as a church to evangelize people? What will you do to help that, including younger people? What will you do to help nurture them in the faith and provide a place and an environment for them to encounter God in worship? The future of our church and your spiritual health and growth and the spiritual health and growth of our church depends on your answer.